All right, we're going to write the equation for this sinusoid. First step would be, well, is this sine or is it cosine? Well, how you tell that is you look at the beginning. Sine starts at the midline. Cosine starts at the amplitude from the midline. So as you can tell for this one, isn't it starting at the middle of the graph? So you can hopefully see this is a sine graph. So the first thing we're going to do is remind ourselves, okay, this is going to be a sine graph when we write the equation. All right, so again, we look at the first dot, boom. Now, since it's a sine graph, does it also tell us, if that's the first dot, where a midline is? So that also tells us right here is our midline. So boom, okay, we have our midline. So if we actually want to do the map, our midline is going to be y equals 0. Okay, it helps to write all these things out. Our amplitude, well, what would be our amplitude? Because it will help us make our equation. Well, what I want to do here to find my amplitude is, don't you want to, from your midline, go up to hit one of the highest or lowest points? It doesn't matter, but from your midline, you have to go up or down to hit your highest or lowest point. And if I look at that, I see that is a 3. So my amplitude is 3. All right, next, I want to look at my period. And my period, well, if I started here, my period is where it repeats. So is my period right here? No, it hasn't completely repeated. It has hit the same dot, but it hasn't completely repeated. Isn't it right there? That's one cycle. Went up, down, and then from here, I'm going to repeat. So that's the end of my period. So that would be the end. So from 0 to pi is my period. So my period is pi. Now the question is, well, for writing the equation, you don't want pi. The equation for a sine graph looks like this. It's y equals a sine bx plus k. A is your amplitude, b, it creates your period, and k is your midline. So the period has to be altered to find the b. So let's find b, and here's the formula for b. To find b, what you're going to do is you're going to take 2 pi and divide by the period. You can write period if you want. Which is the same formula to find the period. You do 2 pi divided by b. It's the same formula both ways. So let's do that. Let's do, to find b, can we take 2 pi and divide by pi? When we do that, we get 2. And from that, we have our amplitude, our b, and our k, because it's our midline. So let's write our equation. Our equation is going to be y equals our amplitude, which was 3. Now, is this sine graph flipped, or is it in the right direction? Is that going to be a negative 3 or a positive 3? Well, isn't sine going up? And isn't that normal for sine to go up first? So we know it's not going to be a negative, so it stays a positive 3 because it's going up. If it were to go down first, that would be a negative 3. Okay, let's go back. Now we have the sine. We know this is a sine graph. All right, we have x, or you could use theta. You can use the 0 with a line through it, theta. Anyways, our b is our b. Okay, so is that our b, or is that, which one's our b? Well, look for the letter b. Right there, 2. Not, pi is your period, not your b. And we're looking for b. So we're looking for the 2 here, 2. So what goes here is the 2. All right, and then our midline is our last piece, our k, and our midline 0. So do I have to put plus 0? Nah. You could if you want. It's not wrong. It's just doesn't necessary. That right there is the equation for this sine graph. So let's write the equation for this graph right here. Now for this graph, hopefully you'll notice this one is starting down here, which is not starting in the middle. It's not starting at the midline, because if you see, your midline is right there. So this one does not start at the midline. So what kind of graph doesn't start at the midline? What you should realize is this is going to be a cosine graph. All right? And do you notice cosine is upside down? Because cosine normally will start up here. It's starting on the bottom. So this one's going to be a cosine graph, and it's going to have a flip to it. So we're going to have a cosine flipped graph. Let's keep that in our minds as we do this. All right, our midline for this one, our M, or a midline, is y equals 0, so it's the x-axis, so no vertical shift on this one. All right, our amplitude, well, what is our amplitude for this one? Well, if we go from the midline up to the highest point, or just right here, isn't that, you can look at this or you can look at this, either one. Wherever you want, just somewhere from the midline up or down, and you'll see it's 2. But it does have a flip. Let's put flip again, just to remind ourselves again. It's going to be flipping. Don't have to put that, just reminding. We talked about it earlier. There is a flip. All right, and the last piece here is we want our period. Well, our period started here, and doesn't it end at the same spot? So isn't that right there our period? 4 pi. But we don't want our period, we want our b. So to get b, we're going to take 2 pi and divide by the period. And when we reduce that, we get a half. So half is our b value. That's what we're going to use to make our equation. So we have all the pieces to make our equation. So equations are always y equals or f of x equals. Make sure you put that y equals or f of x equals. It's commonly missed. Next, well, our amplitude goes first. It's 2, but with a flip. So how do you make 2 with the flip? You put a negative on it. So what we have here is we're going to put a negative 2 to start this. We said it's a cosine. All right. We could put x or theta. I'm going to put theta this time. Is that okay? It doesn't matter what you put, x or theta. And, well, what goes here? Is it the 4 pi or the 1/2? And if you remember, it's the b value, not the period. So we're going to put the 1/2 here. Now, there's multiple ways to write that. You could put a 1/2 in front, or could you simply put theta over 2? You could put 1/2 theta or theta over 2, either one. And then lastly, the midline, but the midline's 0, so you don't have to put something at the end. So that would be the equation of that sinusoidal graph.